Well, my starting position is that climate change is a problem completely unlike any other problem we've had to face politically before, because it's a problem of largely abstract future risk, which is not visible in people's lives. As a consequence, for most of the public, most of the time, it's not something which impinges on their everyday concerns. So on the one hand, you've got the possibility of global catastrophe. On the other, you've got a public which is largely disengaged from this, and the key problem in climate change politics is to try to bridge the gap between the two, to bring climate change into the center of orthodox political concerns and develop long-term policies capable of coping with that. First of all, I think politically you have to reduce some of the divisions which center on climate change, especially left-right divisions. You need a substantial proportion of people in the center or the political right to support climate change policy. That's one way to do it. Another way is you have to mobilize the civil service, because you need people working behind the scenes who will keep climate change policy going, even while climate change drifts in and out of the news. Third, civil society, activist groups have a really important role, because they have to monitor the politicians and the business leaders whose obligation it is to help push this transformation through. Many of the most important innovations, economically, socially, technologically, have actually come about in wartime. And you could say, for example, the Western welfare state was largely constructed as an outcome of the Second World War. And for example, jet travel, that was a result of war-driven imperatives. But in the case of climate change, we don't have enemies in that sense. You can't use that energizing principle. So that's why it's a very different situation from any previously in the past. And you know, we're at a major transition point where we just don't know if we can achieve these things. You know, I use this term utopian realism. You need an element of utopia because you need an element of vision. It's no good just saying we have to avoid a horrendous future. That's not going to mobilize people. We have to show what kind of positive future we want. That has to involve ideals. That kind of society has to be different to some extent from our existing society. That will certainly involve lifestyle change of quite a substantial proportion in people's lives. But we know various ways in which you can actually produce leverage for that. For example, we know that sheer economic growth does not increase people's average happiness, and does not, might sometimes even reduce the overall level of actual welfare that people have. There's an opportunity there for an insertion of a new kind of politics. But it has to be realistic in the sense in which we can't create empty utopias, because those produce no effect or they simply alienate people. So we have to find a path to tread which will reintroduce some positive ideals into the climate change debate, but at the same time anchor them in the real political possibilities that I'm writing about.